I thought I had the perfect marriage, the perfect life, until one ordinary afternoon shattered everything I believed in. What came next was a journey through heartbreak, betrayal, and a chance at a love I never saw coming. It felt like any other day, or so I thought. For weeks, I had stuck to my routine, trying to shake off the growing sense that something was wrong. Lauren had been distant for a while, but I convinced myself it was just the stress of her job. We had built a life together, a life I thought was unshakable. Looking back now, I realized the signs were there all along, small, subtle clues that only made sense later. That day started out like any other. I went about my errands, lost in thought, trying to distract myself from the nagging doubts in my mind. I moved from one stop to the next, going through the motions of daily life. But then, out of nowhere, a small, unexpected event sent everything into chaos. They say being in the wrong place at the wrong time can change everything. That afternoon, I learned how true that really is. I was sitting at a red light, tired and a little drained, when a car pulled up next to me. The driver motioned for me to roll down my window. "You've got a flat tire," he said. Grateful for the heads up, I nodded and pulled into the parking lot of a nearby Target to check. Sure enough, a screw was embedded in the tire, causing a slow but steady leak. "Great," I muttered under my breath. I decided the best plan was to head home and grab a jar of tire sealant. Once I had it, I could deal with the issue properly. When I got home, though, I made the mistake of pulling the screw out too soon. A loud hiss of air rushed out, and I scrambled to put the screw back in before it got any worse. Then I drove to the gas station in the parking lot to refill the tire, hoping I could make it home. I was only about 15 miles away, so I kept an eye on the tire in my side mirror as I drove. If it deflated too quickly, I'd stop and use the sealant. About 5 miles from home, though, the tire looked dangerously low again. I pulled into the lot of a nearby convenience store, but they didn't have an air pump. With no other option, it was time to break out the slime and try to patch things up before I was stranded for good. I put the sealant in, and green slime began oozing out of the tire. I guess they call it slime for a reason. The hissing air stopped, and for a moment, I felt a small sense of relief. Just as I was about to get back into the car, a massive pickup truck pulled into the lot. It was the kind of truck you'd expect to see in a commercial, huge tires, lifted so high you'd need a step ladder to climb in. I recognized that truck immediately. The door swung open, and out stepped a tall man with blonde hair, cowboy boots, and a belt buckle big enough to be a trophy. I chuckled quietly at the sight, but the humor didn't last. The passenger door opened next, and out came a woman with striking raven black hair. My stomach dropped. It was Lauren, my wife of 18 years. What the hell was she doing here? I parked off to the side, my car blending into the background. It was a small, nondescript company vehicle, nothing that would catch anyone's attention. They didn't even glance in my direction as they walked toward the store, hand in hand. Lauren was laughing, her head tilted toward him like they were sharing some private joke. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck myself. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe or move. All I could do was stand there, frozen in shock. Then it hit me, I knew this guy. I had seen him before, outside Lauren's office. She worked as the office manager at a mental health clinic, and this guy was part of the customer service team. His name came rushing back to me, Jack Carter. I had spotted his truck parked near her building more than once. But what was Lauren doing here with him? Why wasn't she at work? I wasn't going to let this go. I climbed back into my car and waited. A few minutes later, they came out of the store, each carrying a coffee cup. Jack helped Lauren into the truck with an easy familiarity that made my stomach churn. Then they sped off together, and I followed at a safe distance. They didn't go far. When they turned into our neighborhood, my pulse quickened. Jack drove straight into the garage of my house. The door slid shut behind them, cutting off my view of whatever came next. I parked a little way down the street, my mind racing. I stayed there for about half an hour, trying to decide what to do. But the nagging thought of my tire brought me back to reality. I got out to check it, but it seemed fine for now. 2 hours passed, and eventually, they left. As they drove past me, my stomach clenched. I knew I couldn't let this go. I held up a file folder to shield my face, not that they were paying attention. Jack and Lauren were too wrapped up in each other to notice anything outside their little bubble. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Lauren wasn't supposed to leave work until 5, and it was barely 2:30. That gave me some time to figure out my next move. The first thing I needed to do was go inside the house and see what I could find. At 4, I had to pick up my daughter, Chloe, from school. She's 15, and the thought of her being dragged into this mess made my chest tighten. I had no idea what I was going to say to her, but first, I needed answers. When I stepped into the house, it was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the faint drip from the faucet in Chloe's bathroom, a problem I kept meaning to fix, and the soft hum of the air coming through the vents. Everything looked normal at first glance. But as I moved upstairs, my heart sank. The bed wasn't the way I had left it that morning. The sheets were crumpled, clearly used. My stomach dropped, and I felt my legs give out. Pressing my back against the wall, I slid to the floor, completely numb. There was only one explanation, and it hit me like a freight train. I sat there for what felt like forever, my mind spiraling. Nothing made sense. The betrayal, the audacity, it was too much to process. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, my insides twisted into knots. My stomach growled, jolting me out of my daze. I forced myself to get up and headed to the kitchen for a Sprite. My whole body felt overheated and clammy, so I went to the bathroom to cool off. I grabbed a washcloth, soaked it in cold water, and wiped my face. The sensation helped, giving me a moment to gather myself. That's when I noticed something odd, the shower floor was still wet. They had showered before leaving. The realization made my blood boil. I wandered back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in a haze. It wasn't just my bed anymore, it was the scene of their betrayal. The thought jolted me to my feet. I looked around the room like it was a crime scene, every detail magnified and sickening. Divorcing Lauren wasn't a question, it was a certainty. But beyond that, I had no idea where to start. How would I even begin to explain this to Chloe? What could I possibly say to make her understand? Feeling like a ghost of myself, I stumbled out to the car. My head was spinning, my chest tight. There was still so much to do, and I had no idea how to face any of it. I'd been drunk for 10 days straight. My head pounded relentlessly, and I knew I probably looked as bad as I felt. I wasn't fit to drive, but I couldn't leave Chloe waiting at school. As the thought of her crossed my mind, a sliver of clarity broke through the haze. Chloe was the one person I could always count on, my anchor. My baby girl was going to be okay, I had to make sure of that. When I pulled into the line of cars at the school, I spotted her right away, standing by the front doors. She walked down the sidewalk toward me, her presence so radiant it made my chest ache. Chloe had inherited her mother's striking dark hair and warm, Mediterranean complexion, but her eyes, they were something else. They were a mesmerizing hazel, with streaks of gold and green that caught the light in ways I'd never seen before. The doctor had called them hazel, but to me, they were unique, just like her. She was tall, like me, with long honey-brown legs that made her look older than her 15 years. Chloe was undeniably beautiful, but in that moment, all I could see was my little girl, the only bright spot in my crumbling world. She tossed her backpack into the back seat and leaned in to kiss me, but froze halfway. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Are you sick? Did something happen? Is Mom okay? What's going on, Daddy?" Her voice grew louder, the fear unmistakable. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm fine, kitten," I said, my voice as steady as I could manage. "No one's hurt or sick. But I need to talk to you, Chloe. Let's go to the park, okay? I just need to hold you and talk for a minute. No more questions until we get there. Can you do that for me?" Her wide, searching eyes stared into mine. "Okay, Daddy," she said hesitantly, her voice softening. "But you're scaring me." "I know, kitten. I know. But it's going to be okay," I said, praying that wasn't a lie. The drive to the park took 5 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. That park held so many memories, memories of laughter and love. I'd pushed Chloe on those swings 1,000 times, her giggles echoing in the air. Rachel and I used to sit on the benches, watching her play, sharing quiet smiles. Back then, life felt so whole, so secure. Was that all I had left now? Just memories of better times? Chloe and I walked to a bench, and she slipped her hand into mine. Her arm swung lightly, just as it had when she was a little girl. She looked up at me with that same trusting expression, one I was terrified of breaking. We sat down, and I tried to find the right words, though none seemed good enough for what I had to say. "Just tell me, Daddy," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with concern. "I can handle it," Chloe said, her voice steady even as her hazel eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. She looked at me with determination, willing herself to be strong. "I'm not sure I can," I admitted, my voice breaking. Then, I told her everything, what I had seen, what I had felt, and how my world seemed to crumble in an instant. Tears streaked down my face, and through it all, Chloe held my hand tightly, her presence steady and reassuring. When I finished, she drew in a deep breath and said, "Let's go home." Without hesitation, she took the wheel, and though it felt strange letting her drive, I knew I wasn't in any state to do it myself. Chloe navigated us carefully through the streets, her hands firm on the wheel, and soon enough, we were pulling into the driveway. Lauren's car sat in the garage as if nothing had happened. Lauren greeted us at the door with warm hugs and kisses, her usual smile firmly in place. "How about takeout tonight?" she asked cheerfully. "My treat." Chloe didn't skip a beat. "We need to talk to you for a minute, Mom," she said, her voice calm but serious. Lauren blinked, her smile faltering slightly. "Okay," she said cautiously. "Everything all right, baby?" "I don't know," Chloe replied evenly, glancing at me for support. "Let's find out." We moved into the living room, where Chloe and I sat together on the couch. Lauren lingered near the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes darting between us with growing suspicion. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone edged with defense. "Are you trying to trap me? What's going on?" "No one's trying to trap you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But we need the truth, Lauren. You've been lying. We all know it. Why did you do it?" Lauren's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I knew this was coming," she said sharply. "Fine. Yes, I was here. But that's why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd grill me and twist things around." "No one twisted anything," Chloe cut in, her voice rising. "But I am accusing you now. You cheated on Dad, didn't you?" Her words landed like a hammer. Lauren flinched but didn't deny it. Instead, she launched into a rushed explanation. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "Jack's a good man. He even has a daughter, Chloe. He'd really like you, I know he would." Chloe's face turned crimson with anger, and she shot up from the couch, her voice trembling. "Are you serious?" she shouted. "I'm not living with that guy. He'd probably sneak into my room at night. I'm staying with Dad. I'm done with you. How could you do this to us?" Before Lauren could respond, Chloe stormed out of the room. Her footsteps thundered up the stairs, and moments later, her door slammed shut. The sharp click of the lock echoed through the house. Lauren turned back to me, pale and trembling. "She'll calm down," she said weakly. "Jack's a really nice guy, Ethan. I think you'd like him." "I'm sorry, but I need to be happy." I stared at her, disbelief and fury rising in my chest. "Then maybe you can find happiness at one of those motels," I said coldly, my voice thick with disgust. "You know, the kind that rents by the hour. That seems more your speed." Her eyes filled with tears, and she recoiled as if I had struck her. "That's cruel, Ethan," she whispered. "You don't have to call me names. I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't mean to fall in love with Jack. It just happened." We clicked, and I realized I had to follow my heart. I shook my head, the bitterness rising like bile. "You didn't just fall in love, Lauren. You destroyed the family we built. And for what?" "I never meant to hurt you," Lauren said, her voice trembling as she tried to hold my gaze. "Oh, so you just accidentally hurt me?" I shot back sarcastically. "Like tripping and poking someone's eye out by mistake." My voice dripped with bitterness, the heat of my anger building with every word. "Ethan, I didn't want to lose you as a friend," she continued, desperation seeping into her tone. "We've been together for too long for me to just throw it all away." I stared at her, the sadness and grief I'd been carrying for days suddenly giving way to a fierce, burning anger. "You're delusional, Lauren," I said, my voice low and cold. "Friends? With you? With that dirtbag you're calling a soulmate? Not a chance. Tell him that if he ever sees me, he'd better run. As for you, you're the enemy now." Her face paled as I continued. "I'll destroy everything you have. You've got 3 days. After that, I never want to see you again." Without another word, I turned and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. The next day, I called my boss and explained the situation. I didn't go into too many details, but I told him I was filing for divorce and needed a few days off. He was understanding, told me to take as much time as I needed, and offered his condolences. Downstairs, I brewed a pot of coffee, the mundane task grounding me for a moment. I poured myself a cup, then made breakfast for Chloe and me. When she came downstairs, looking as radiant as ever, she eagerly dug into the pancakes I'd made, the normalcy of the moment giving me a fleeting sense of comfort. A little while later, Lauren entered the kitchen. She poured herself a cup of coffee and tried to engage us in conversation. Neither Chloe nor I acknowledged her. We carried on as if she wasn't even there. Eventually, it was time to take Chloe to school. As we prepared to leave, Lauren asked Chloe if she was ready. Chloe didn't even look at her. Instead, she turned to me and said, "I'm ready, Dad." I drove Chloe to school in silence, my mind already racing with plans for the next steps. I knew I had to meet with a divorce attorney, so later that day, I sat down with Elizabeth Baxter. The meeting didn't start off well. She had assumptions about why I was seeking a divorce. "I want to make something clear," I said, interrupting her mid-sentence. "You've got it wrong. I'm not leaving Lauren for someone else. Lauren is having an affair with one of her coworkers. He's married, and apparently, they're both planning to divorce so they can be together." Elizabeth studied me for a moment before responding. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't represent people who leave their spouses for someone else. I can't live with myself if I do." "I get it," I replied, the weight of her judgment settling heavily on my chest. "But that's not what's happening here." The meeting pressed on, but I realized the first thing I needed to do was make a list, a plan to take back control of my life and figure out how to navigate this storm. I decided the first people who needed to know the truth were Lauren's parents. They adored me, and they absolutely cherished Chloe. I knew this would hit them hard, but they deserved to hear it from me. The next priority was letting our friends know what had happened. If Lauren was intent on destroying our family, then I figured the least I could do was make sure the people who cared about us knew the truth. Social media seemed like the perfect tool to start setting the record straight. Lauren had a Facebook account for our family, so I logged in, accessed Messenger, and began piecing together conversations. It didn't take long to find what I needed, details about her affair with Jack. I searched online and quickly identified Jack's wife and her social profiles. If she didn't know yet, she had every right to. I drafted a message to her, carefully wording it to ensure she'd understand the situation. I knew there was a risk people might lash out at me, but the truth needed to come out. Around 2 p.m., my phone lit up with Lauren's name. I answered, already bracing for her reaction. "You absolute jerk," she screamed, her voice shaking with fury. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you? I know you blocked me on Facebook, but take that down right now. Jack's wife doesn't even know yet, and now my friends are blowing up my phone asking what's going on. My parents know everything, thanks to you. I'm telling you, Ethan, clean this up. Now." "No, Lauren," I said firmly. "I'm not cleaning anything up. You made this mess, and you're going to live with the consequences." She sputtered, furious but with no retort. The sound of her struggling for words gave me a grim satisfaction. I hung up before she could regain her footing. Later that day, as I picked Chloe up from school, she brought up the situation. "Dad, I don't ever want to be in the same house as that guy unless you're there," she said firmly. "I don't care what you have to do, just make sure it doesn't happen, okay?" I placed a hand on her shoulder. "I promise, Chloe," I said. "You don't have to worry." We picked up pizza on the way home, and as I settled in to enjoy my second slice, my phone buzzed. It was Bob, Lauren's dad. I swallowed hard, knowing this conversation was going to be a pivotal one. I wasn't expecting the call from Lauren's dad, Bob. When my phone buzzed and I saw his name, I hesitated for a moment. Chloe noticed my reaction and immediately said, "Put it on speaker, Dad." Bob didn't waste time. "Ethan, I don't know what's going on, but Lauren came over last night, crying. She wouldn't say much, but it's clear things aren't good between you two. What's happening?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Bob, I'm really sorry this has all come to this. Lauren's been having an affair, and there's no coming back from that for me. But please don't worry about Chloe. You and Grace will always be her grandparents, and that won't change. I know you love Lauren and want to support her, and I respect that. I just hope you don't end up hating me when this is all over." "That's never going to happen," Bob said firmly. "Your family, Ethan. I'll figure out what's going on. Call me if you need anything." "Thanks, Bob," I said, the lump in my throat loosening slightly. The conversation had gone better than I'd feared. Life throws curveballs, and all you can do is try your best to deal with them. The next chapter of this ordeal was court-mandated counseling. Lauren and I were assigned to a pair of counselors, an older couple who seemed like they were straight out of a 70s commune. They asked us to state our goals for the sessions during the first meeting. Lauren's goals were long-winded and idealistic. She rambled on about her happiness being the universe's ultimate purpose and how she just wanted good things for everyone involved. When it was my turn, the counselor looked at me expectantly. "What's your purpose for these sessions, Mr. Berryman?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "My goal is to finish them." The counselor frowned. "Mr. Berryman, do you really not want to address the issues that led to the breakdown of your marriage? These sessions are meant to help you work through your problems." "I'm not responsible for the judge's expectations," I replied calmly. "Only for my own." The counselor wasn't pleased and tried to make things more difficult by assigning tasks that required me to spend additional time with Lauren. She, in turn, took every opportunity to try and wear me down. "Ethan," she asked one afternoon, "what would it take for you to give up the divorce and work things out with me?" "An act of God," I said without missing a beat. She waited, expecting me to elaborate, but I didn't. "What do you mean by an act of God?" she finally asked, her tone exasperated. "Well," I said slowly, "if you can turn back time and undo everything, the affair, the lies, the betrayal, then we can talk." Her face fell, and she didn't push further. The counseling dragged on, and I kept my focus on what mattered, Chloe, and ensuring our lives moved forward without unnecessary drama. One day, during one of our sessions, Lauren brought up an old family tradition. We had often spent weekends at the lake during the summers, taking the RV and the boat. Chloe loved water skiing, and it was one of the few times we'd all been genuinely happy together. "You used to love taking the RV and staying the whole weekend," she said wistfully. I didn't respond. Nostalgia was no match for the stark reality we were facing now. Lauren could reminisce all she wanted, but no amount of memories would change the present. I agreed to the weekend trip, though I had mixed feelings about it. Chloe and her best friend, Lily, spent the entire week buzzing with excitement, planning every detail down to the snacks and activities. By Thursday, they had packed everything imaginable, and by Friday afternoon, a shiny red Jeep Cherokee pulled into the driveway. Lily leapt out, looking like a younger version of her mom, Julie. As soon as Lily stepped out, she was swarmed by Chloe and Lily herself, who hugged her, showering her with kisses and squeals of excitement. "Don't worry, Mom. We're going to have so much fun," Lily said with her usual energy. Julie smiled at her daughter, smoothing the edge of her jacket. "It's okay, honey. Just remember to behave and have fun." Chloe grinned mischievously and added, "Julie, Dad's going to love you just as much as I do." Julie gave her an exasperated but amused look before turning to me. "You two go sit on the porch," she said, her tone firm but kind. "I need to talk to Ethan." The girls giggled as they obeyed, scampering off to the porch. Julie faced me, her expression apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she began, though her lips twitched as if she were trying not to laugh. Before she could continue, Lily, overhearing us, deepened her voice and growled, "I am not cute," in her best cartoon villain impression. That broke the tension completely. We all burst into laughter, and the moment felt light again. The girls' antics were impossible to stay mad at, though I couldn't deny they'd thrown me into an awkward position. "We know what you're up to," I said, pointing a finger at Chloe and Lily. "Stop it. Seriously, you can't just mess with people's lives like this." Chloe's face fell, and she pouted. "But I love Julie, and I didn't know how else to introduce her to you," she said softly. "You could have just told me," I said, my tone firm but gentle. Seeing the flicker of sadness in her expression, I sighed and softened further. "It's okay, kitten. Just don't do it again, all right?" "Okay, Dad," she replied, her smile returning, eyes sparkling with sincerity. Julie chuckled at the scene, her sun-kissed tan hinting at a life filled with outdoor adventures. For a brief moment, I wondered if Lily would grow up to look just like her mom. They shared the same vibrant energy. The thought made me smile, even if the situation had caught me off guard. By the time we arrived at the lake, the awkwardness had faded, replaced by the kind of warm camaraderie that made everything feel just a little easier. I set up the boat while Chloe and Lily dashed off to change into their swimsuits. A few minutes later, Julie emerged, and for a moment, I almost dropped what I was holding. She was absolutely stunning, slender but curvy in all the right places, with the same confident energy as her daughter, but tempered by a maturity that made her even more captivating. She caught me staring, and with a playful wink, she said, "Need a hand?" Her words jolted me back to reality, and I quickly busied myself with the boat, trying to act casual. The weekend was going perfectly, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so relaxed and genuinely happy. That evening, after a fun day of boating and swimming, Julie and I stood by her car as the girls climbed in. Just as she was about to leave, I tapped on her window. "Julie, would you be interested in going out with me next Friday?" I asked, trying to keep my nerves in check. Lily let out a squeal from inside the car, while Julie smiled brightly. "What time?" she asked. 6. I suggested. "We can have dinner and find something fun to do." "Sounds great," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek before sliding into the car. As they drove off, I couldn't stop smiling, feeling a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in years. When I got home, Chloe was waiting for me at the door, her eyes lit up with curiosity. "Did you ask her out?" she demanded, barely able to contain her grin. "Yeah, I did," I admitted, and her face broke into a wide smile. "Good," she said, satisfied, before darting upstairs. Friday arrived, and I picked up Julie for our date. She was as radiant as ever, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit that made her look effortlessly beautiful. We started the evening with a game of racquetball, her suggestion. It didn't take long to see that she was a natural athlete, quick and nimble, her petite frame giving her an edge in speed and agility. I could barely keep up with her sharp turns and clever maneuvers. Afterward, we both sat near the court, catching our breath and laughing over our game. Julie grabbed her phone. "Let's take a picture for the kids," she said, holding it up. We posed with our rackets and goggles, and she snapped the shot, sending it off to Chloe and Lily. Their responses came in almost instantly, filled with emojis and teasing remarks that made us both laugh. We showered and changed, then headed out for dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. The food was incredible, and we stuffed ourselves while sharing stories and memories. As the night went on, the conversation grew more personal, and Julie shared a bit of her past. "When I was in college, I thought I'd found the love of my life," she began, her voice calm but tinged with nostalgia. "A week before graduation, I found out I was pregnant. At first, I wasn't upset because we had talked about getting married. But 3 days later, I learned Brad had been cheating on me. I dumped him and never looked back." She paused for a moment, then smiled softly. "When Lily was born, I didn't have time for a social life. By the time I could even think about dating again, I realized I had this amazing gift. I couldn't make a decision without considering her first." Her words stayed with me long after our date ended. As I dropped her off at home and watched her walk to her door, I realized just how much I admired her strength and the way she built her life around her daughter. It had been a wonderful evening, and as I drove home, I couldn't help but feel that this was the start of something special. I found myself enjoying Julie's friendship almost as much as I loved having her as my girlfriend. We were constantly in touch, calling, texting funny things, or just sending a few words throughout the day. Whenever I came across something I knew would make her laugh, I couldn't wait to share it with her. Over time, we grew incredibly close, learning the little details about each other's lives that only best friends and partners know. We started having dinner together every Tuesday, just the 4 of us, Julie, Chloe, Lily, and me. Those evenings became a highlight of my week. We'd play games, share stories, and just relax as a family. I couldn't help but smile at how seamlessly we all fit together. Of course, not everything in my life was so harmonious. One day, Lauren asked to meet and began with an apology, at least, it sounded like one at first. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said. "I'm sorry for trying to take Chloe away from you, for trying to mess with you in the divorce." But then her tone shifted. "What I really want to say is," she trailed off, and I braced myself, thinking for once I might hear her admit the truth. But the words I hoped for never came. I've never heard her say she was sorry for cheating on me, I thought bitterly. And I didn't hear it that time, either. Lauren just couldn't take responsibility for her actions. In that moment, I realized forgiveness wasn't even about her anymore. I'd come to terms with what happened, and I had calmed down. I hadn't forgotten, but I wasn't going to waste energy on bitterness. People have the right to make mistakes, but that didn't mean I had to let her keep affecting my life. "You're not my wife anymore," I told her firmly. "You found your soulmate, remember? And it wasn't me. Stay out of my life, Lauren." She still had a way of pushing my buttons, but I left the conversation fuming. I told Chloe what happened, and she was just as angry as I was. After that, I made arrangements for Bob or Cindy, her grandparents, to handle pickups and drop-offs. Taking Lauren out of the equation as much as possible was a huge relief and one less thing to stress about. On the 7-month anniversary of our lake trip, I asked Julie out for a special date. I wanted it to be memorable, and I think she knew it was important to me. The evening was perfect from the start, and as we wrapped up, I noticed how close she stayed to me. She practically cuddled against my side as we got back in the car, holding onto my arm and resting her head on my shoulder. When we pulled into the garage, Julie didn't let go. Her warmth and presence felt like the perfect ending to a wonderful night. In that moment it was clear how much we meant to each other, and I knew I'd found something I hadn't realized I was missing, a true partner who understood me completely. I let Julie out of the car, and she stayed close to my side as we walked into the house. She didn't let go of my arm, and by the time we reached the bedroom, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. That night, we fell asleep in each other's arms, but not before making love twice, once on my initiative and once on hers. Each moment felt effortless and full of warmth. The next morning, I woke up on my back, Julie half lying on top of me, her hair draped across my chest. The early sunlight streaming in through the curtains lit up her face, and for a moment, I just lay there, marveling at how peaceful she looked. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, and her eyes fluttered open. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still heavy with sleep. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Good morning," I replied. Later that evening, I decided it was time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring box. Julie's eyes widened as I knelt before her and opened it to reveal the delicate, antique ring inside. It glinted in the light, its intricate design catching her attention immediately. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice full of awe. "It looks antique. Where did you find it? When did you buy it? Remember when I told you I was going to that auction about a month ago?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, I remember. They were auctioning off that estate, right?" "Exactly," I said. "What I didn't mention at the time was that I saw this ring in the catalog. I went there specifically to buy it, with the plan to ask you to marry me." Her hands trembled as she picked up the ring to examine it more closely. It fit perfectly in her hand, though I could tell the band would need to be resized. Still, in that moment, it was flawless. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. As I slid the ring onto her finger, emotions I couldn't quite name surged through me. Relief, hope, love, it all blended into one. For the first time in years, I felt like I had stepped fully out of the shadow of my past. The hurt and resentment I'd carried for so long had finally started to fade. Julie and I built something beautiful together. The lake trips became a regular part of our lives, each one filled with laughter, quiet moments, and the joy of the family we had formed. Every time we returned, I felt more at peace. Those moments reminded me that life, no matter how painful it may seem at times, always has the potential to bring something wonderful on the other side. Lauren had her life, and I had mine. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could say with absolute certainty that I was happy. Truly happy. The darkness had lifted, and in its place was a light I hadn't believed I'd ever see again.